When we looked previously at sounds which are the same and sounds which are different, we suggested that in a language there are sounds which are different and they contrast with each other, and there are other sounds which, although they are certainly different, they don't contrast and people don't notice the differences insofar as they're used for conveying the fact that we're dealing with a same or a different word. And we started to use a new term, and we are calling this particular area of study phonology as opposed to phonetics. Phonetics is the study of speech sounds, whereas phonology is the study of the sound systems of a language. All languages have small, finite inventories of phonemes, that is, contrastive sounds, and these sounds fit up into a phonological system. Languages might have as many as 100 phonemes, or they might have only 20. English has somewhere in the mid-40s, depending on what variety of English you speak. Why do we have to have a small, finite inventory of phonemes? Well, the answer is that words are built out of phonemes. Their sound system is built out of a set of phonemes. If we didn't know whether something was a contrastive sound or not, we'd never know whether we were dealing with a word which was the same as another one or a different word. So languages always have one of these small systems of phonemes, the contrastive units that are used to build the sound element of a word. And phonology is the study of the phonemes and phoneme system of a particular language, so you can do the phonology of English and German and Hawaiian, but you can also look at phonology in general and look at the way in which languages in general build their sound systems. So how do you find phonemes? They're mysterious units. We suggested previously that they were perceptual, so we essentially have to look in your brain and not in your mouth. That's where phonemes are. Phonemes are not in your mouth. When you produce a sound, that's an allophone of some phoneme or other. The phoneme itself is back in your brain. Well, if you're a native speaker of a language, you have intuitions about the phonology of your own language. You have intuitions about which phonemes are different from which others. In other words, you know about contrast. You can hear contrasts. But if there are languages you don't know, then you need some kind of analytic system. And a number of these systems were developed by anthropological linguists in order to go to languages which hadn't been recorded and to find out what the phoneme system was. Once you find out the phoneme system, of course, you can invent a spelling system and you can invent writing, because spelling systems are based on the sensible notion that if there are so many phonemes in a language, then there should be so many letters. English, as we saw, isn't based on that sensible assumption. For example, we know that English spelling has only 5 vowels, A, E, I, O, and U, but it has many more vowel phonemes. But if you're going to go into a language which hasn't been recorded before, then the sensible thing to do is to invent a spelling system which is based exactly on the phonemes of the language. So anthropological and missionary linguists have devised systems for telling whether two sounds are in contrast or not. And we can illustrate that with our own language. Because native speakers know the phonemes of their own language, you can identify them using a particular test. And the test is to take two words which differ in only one sound and ask yourself, is that difference a contrastive difference? One phoneme, well, do need and feed contrast, and if so, where? Well, the eed bit is the same for both words, and the only contrast is in n and f. They are different, they're in contrast. So these two words are a minimal pair, with one sound only at the beginning in contrast. That's where they differ. Lord and lad in my dialect are the same at the beginning and end, and only the vowel differs. I have an or vowel in the middle of the first word and an a vowel in the middle of the second word. So that's a minimal pair again. They differ by only one phoneme. When we get differences of that sort, it's tempting to think that we've found a phoneme. But what we've actually found is a contrast in one position. In the two words we saw in the previous slide, the position was the first position in the word or the middle position, the vowel position in the word. So we have to look at location. These minimal pairs show contrast, but they show it only in this particular location. And it's not always the case that if sounds contrast in one location, they will always also contrast in all the other locations where that sound might occur. So what do we say about them as allophones? Well, the variant forms of the T sound that we saw in the previous session, those various forms are all different allophones of the same one and the same phoneme. They're all T sounds, whereas Lord and Lad, that contrast shows that or and a as sounds are allophones of different phonemes. Remember, the phoneme is in your head and the allophone is what comes out of your mouth. So what do I mean by distribution? Well, I mean, let's go back to the train. If you remember the train, the carriages come out of the tunnel one after another. So do the sounds that come out of your mouth. They come out one after the other. They're sound segments. And so we have to deal with where things are distributed relative to others. We've seen that sounds can be in initial position in a word, in medial position, in final position. And so statements of distribution are always statements about where these allophones come within a distribution, within a sequence, one after the other. So it's not just the case that contrast occurs in a particular position. It can occur in that position, but it might not occur in another position. So we have to look carefully at minimal pairs and try and find minimal pairs with a full range of contrasts. So if p and b contrast in first position in the word, can we also find a minimal pair, two words where the contrast occurs in final position? For example, nip and nib. Yes, that contrast occurs both in initial position and final position. So when we say that, we're making statements of the distribution of allophones of either the same phoneme or different phonemes. In the next section, we'll look at the allophones of the same phoneme and how do you find out whether two sounds are allophones of the same phoneme.